Mound City is the most picturesque town in the state. It nestles close under the shelter of Sugar Mound, which extends in the form of a crescent around the east and south sides of town. Beautiful wooded hills are to be seen in every direction, with fertile valleys and winding streams between. On those hills grow thousands of hard and sugar maple trees. He who has not visited this quaint old town in the fall of the year, after the frost has kissed the leaves of these sugar trees, causing them to blush as with maiden modesty, has not seen the real beauty spot of Kansas. J.T. Botkin, 1926.
Thinking about God's country, I feel like that Mound City is not secluded. We're protected we're in a valley. We're below the hill and we're in a valley, and we're protected by God's grace.
This is home. It always has been, and it always will be. Like I say, the generations, the first Wakefield walked into this valley behind the covered wagon when there was nothing here. And they homesteaded out west of town on top of the hill, top of what's known as the Blue Mountain Hill, right to the west of town.
I have lived within 5 miles of the city limit of Mound City for 90 years.
This was where John Brown came through the country during the Civil War, and in that area, and it became the Jayhawks. And that's why we got the Jayhawk school. We got everything Jayhawks in this area.
Well, I want to dig a little deeper.
In 2003, the City Council of Mound City made a proclamation which designated the town as the Jayhawker capital of Kansas. The proclamation read, "Whereas James Montgomery settled near Sugar Mound, Kansas Territory, now Mound City, Linn County, Kansas, in 1854. And as whereas James Montgomery became the leader of an assembly of 50 men known as the Immortal 50, who defended the area against border ruffian and pro-slavery activity. And whereas the assembly of men became known as the original Kansas Jayhawkers, therefore I proclaim upon Mound City, Linn County, Kansas, the designation of Jayhawker capital of Kansas." Signed by Mayor Robert Meyer on May 7, 2003.
There are many stories about where the term Jayhawker came from. Probably the most famous or infamous, depending on your persuasion, is James Montgomery. A Jayhawker is an individual. Jayhawking is an action verb. And jayhawking is defined as robbing, stealing, pillaging. And this was done by Union soldiers in Missouri. It was done by Confederate guerrillas in Missouri. And it was done by Union soldiers from Kansas. It was also done by civilians from Kansas who go over into Missouri. Jayhawking. And there are a number of references in the official records of the War of the Rebellion where Union officers say to their troops, "I will not tolerate any jayhawking from the soldiers of this company on anyone." The Jayhawkers were proud of the fact that they were Jayhawkers.
Many of those living in Mound City today trace their heritage to those who settled in the area as early as the 1850s.
Well, everybody's gonna have religion and everybody's gonna...
I have a great grandfather in my ancestry whose name was William Thomas King, and I think he's probably the earliest been the earliest to settle here in Linn County.
My parents were married in Wall Street Christian Church in 1935, right after the church service. They had talked to the minister ahead of time, and he, of course, knew it, and they invited two or three different couples of special friends, relatives that they wanted there.
The Wakefields came to this country 7 generations ago. Our grandson, my grandson, Morgan, is the 7th generation of Wakefields to walk this very valley. Peggy, my wife, this is Mapleton, Kansas, about 12 miles south of here, in Bourbon County. And we made our home 1 mile from right here, where we're studying, east on 52 Highway on the north side of the road, which we live in today, and we've lived there for 53 years.
I am the oldest living member of both the Scott family and the Wakefield family. A lot of my family came to Linn County in the 1880s. I have family in these following cemeteries: Mound City, Blue Mound, Pleasanton, Curry, Wesley Chapel, the Dingus Cemetery, and Trading Post. If you get into all of the outskirts, somebody said one day, don't talk about anybody or you're talking about Bonnie's relatives.
Bonnie New wrote a story about her ancestor, George W. Wakefield, and it was included in a booklet made by the Mound City Historical Society in 1977. There are many people here today who trace their family lineage back to Mound City at the times of Bleeding Kansas. But before Bleeding Kansas and before the Jayhawkers, there were signs of civilization in the area. The Osage tribe called this area home, and the archaeological digs in more recent years have found abandoned Osage camps near Linn County. In the early 1800s, nearly 30 different Native American tribes were relocated to Kansas. In this area, one tribe forced to relocate from their native lands in Indiana were the Potawatomi.
The group that came here, as I understand it, were holdouts, and the chief was a stubborn, obstinate chief, and he did not want to move. And so they had a good life where they were.
In 1841, 4 nuns of the Sacred Heart Order came to Sugar Creek Mission to teach the Potawatomi children at the mission. Among them was Sister Rose Philippine Duchesne. She was 72 years old when she came to the mission. Rose was born in Grenoble, France in 1769. Due to her age and poor health, Sister Rose was unable to do much except pray. In fact, she prayed so much day and night, the Potawatomi called her Woman Who Prays Always. In 1842, she returned to St. Charles, Missouri, and died in 1852 at age 83. She was beatified in 1940 and canonized as a saint in 1988. Trading Post, situated roughly 16 miles northeast of Mound City, is a place that spurred events that affected the inhabitants of Mound City during the days of Bleeding Kansas. As westward expansion encroached along towards the Kansas-Missouri border, traders and entrepreneurs located to the area to trade with local Native American tribes. As the territorial boundaries were pushed further west and Kansas was opened to settlers, Trading Post was one of the places where immigrants came to find new opportunities. However, these individuals proved to have political beliefs to the point where violence soon erupted.
Trading Post is the longest continually existing settlement in Kansas. We've been here as a fur trading post since 1825, started by the Choteau family, some of the founders of St. Louis, Missouri. The Osage moved closer to be near the trading post to trade their furs for Western wares such as fabric and guns and ammunition and pottery and beads.
Charles Hamilton was the leader of a group of pro-slavery men who led what would become known as the Meridazine Massacre on May 19, 1858. Hamilton and his men marched the Free State men down to a ravine about a half-mile west of the Kansas-Missouri state line. There, the prisoners were lined up single file. Hamilton's men were lined up on higher ground from the Free State men, and at Hamilton's command, fired upon the prisoners. Before leaving, the bushwhackers stole a watch and tried to relieve the dead men of the money, but they found none. Hamilton then had his men leave the ravine and the Free State men to die. In the end, 5 were killed, 5 were wounded, and 1 was unharmed.
He used a false name here in Mound City. People didn't know he was John Brown until after he was hung at Harper's Ferry. The news had gotten out that John Brown was here.
John Brown came to Linn County in the fall of the year 1858. At the invitation of Augustus Wattles, Wattles lived in a settlement just north of Mound City called Monica. To protect himself from bushwhackers and pro-slavery men, Brown used the alias Shubal Morgan while in the area. His headquarters in Mound City was in the home of Mr. Wattles. On December 20th of that year, Brown and other abolitionist men went into Missouri to liberate slaves. A total of 11 slaves were brought to the old cabin at Linn County. Tradition states that while at the Wattles' home, Brown wrote his famous parallels, marking them from trading posts so as to keep his friends safe. The parallels were sent to newspapers in Lawrence and in New York to be published.
Sometime in the summer of 1858, he constructs a building that ends up being called John Brown's Fort, and it is near and on the Mary-to-Scene massacre site. But this is after the massacre. The way history tells us, and there are a number of accounts of this, on a given night, a escaped slave knocks on the door and asks for help to rescue his extended family in Missouri. John Brown's parallels, well, he writes them at Trading Post, and it's a document about his comparison or his parallels about slavery and about what freedom is.
Now, for comparison, 11 persons were forcibly restored to their natural and inalienable rights, with 1 man killed, and all hell is stirred beneath. It is currently reported that the governor of Missouri has made a requisition on the governor of Kansas, for all such men were engaged in the last named dreadful outage. The marshal of Kansas is said to be collecting a posse of Missouri, not Kansas men, at West Point in Missouri, a little town about 10 miles distant, to enforce the laws. All pro-slavery, conservative Free State, and dough-faced men are filled with horror. Consider these 2 cases and the actions of the administration party. Respectfully, John Brown. James Montgomery. He came to Kansas Territory in 1854, settling on a hill 5 miles west of Mound City, in a cabin he bought from a pro-slavery man for a total of $11. It was later burned to the ground by border ruffians.
In 1858 or 1859, Montgomery's original home was destroyed. Burned to the ground during the Bleeding Kansas era. So he constructs a new home. And he reinforces that home with logs and portholes to fire from, and he creates a fort.
Montgomery's fort became a safe house for slaves making their ways through the Underground Railroad. But as the word fort suggests, Montgomery was not a man of passive nature. In the years 1854 to 1861, Montgomery led the Kansas Jayhawkers, who were 50 men who vowed to protect the Free Staters living in Linn County. During the Civil War, Montgomery served in South Carolina, leading the 34th Colored Troops. In Kansas, he served the 6th Kansas State Militia. After the war, Montgomery returned to his farm west of Mound City.
A lot of people were moving up from the south to Missouri, and they thought it was perfectly legal to have slaves in their areas, so they wanted to promote that here. So you can understand why there had to be people who would hide these runaway slaves and, like I say, help them, take them further north, eventually to Canada, which was, they felt safe there. Actually, it said there was a tunnel leading, which would be under the highway now, over into and down close to the creek, and they would use that to move the slaves and the people who were helping them into that area until they could take them by wagon to through Anderson County.
One local abolitionist by the name of Augustus Wattles lived just north of Mound City in a settlement called Monica. In addition to Augustus Wattles, his brother John Wattles, along with T. Elwood Smith, Edwin Smith, and Dr. J.H. Trigo and their families were known to have helped with the Underground Railroad in the area. Located about 2 miles north of Mound City, Monica was heavily settled by abolitionists and their sympathizers, many of whom were Quakers, though the Wattles family were not Quakers themselves.
In the summer of 1862, it was determined in Kansas by General James Henry Lane and others. He's not the one totally responsible for this, but there are others. And that was to recruit African American soldiers for the Union Army.
The year 1862 was the second year of the American Civil War. Families across this great nation were being torn apart. It was truly a war of brother against brother, father against son. Approximately 620,000 people lost their lives during the 4-year war between the states. Though most fighting was seen in the eastern states, eastern Kansas, having been no stranger to violence during the years preceding the war, was readying itself for battle. In eastern Kansas, there were, in the 1860s, 3 main roads going north and south. One was the original military road, located near the Kansas-Missouri state line. The middle road was the new Fort Scott Road, it's being the most direct route to get to Fort Scott. The road is modern-day Highway 69. The west fork of the road went from that location to approximately 3 miles north of Pleasanton at an angle to Mound City. Another road coming down from Spring Hill south to Mound City and on down to a place called Fort Lincoln near Fulton, and then on to Fort Scott. This road is now called Highway 7. These roads were extremely important during the development of Mound City, Linn County, and to eastern Kansas as a whole. During the Civil War, thousands of wagon supply trains from Fort Leavenworth moved south along these roads. This, in turn, caused Mound City to be a strategic location for the military during the early 1860s. In the fall of 1864, Confederate General Sterling Price circled through the state of Missouri, failing to capture St. Louis or Jefferson City. As his orders were to go west into Kansas and do as much damage as he could, Price did so. After being defeated at Westport, Price moved his forces south, crossing into Kansas. All the way, Union General Alfred Pleasonton and his troops following close behind. The Union Army caught up to the retreating Confederate line near Trading Post along the Meridazine River on October 24th.
Price's army stretches out for 11 miles. It is 11 miles from the front to the back. Now, when the Battle of Mine Creek occurs later on in the same day, October 25th, 1864, it doesn't last very long. It starts about 11:30 in the morning, and it's over by 12 o'clock. I mean, it's a vicious, short engagement. However, it's the second largest single-day cavalry engagement in the entire war. The Mine Creek Battle, you have approximately 8,000 Confederates mounted with some artillery. You have approximately only 2,500 Union soldiers with one artillery piece. And it turns out to be a Union victory.
There's quite a story that goes how this got to be the county seat. And I'm sure most people who have read the history of Mound City and Linn County know that. And there was quite a battle went around when they were forming Mound City as to where the county seat would be.
In August 1855, the first Linn County Court met in the village of Paris, located some miles north of Mound City. Commissioners were elected under bogus laws. Those commissioners then divided the county into 3 townships. With the aid of those bogus acts, all men voted into the county offices were pro-slavery men. Then in November 1859, a county election was held to determine the location of the county seat. Mound City received just over 500 votes, Paris 471.
Well, since Paris was the county seat, they of course had all the county records. And so when Mound City was voted as the county seat, they needed those records. And so they went to Paris and even borrowed an old cannon from Osawatomie to bring down to threaten them if they didn't turn over the records, then they were going to fire off the cannon at them and in the cabin. So little did they know it wasn't even loaded, which was found out later, but it did serve the purpose at the time.
Mound City held the distinction of being the county seat for several years until February 1871, when the question was brought to the polls once again. Lacine received 1,589 votes, Mound City only 1,116. Pleasanton obtained a single vote. Lacine became the new county seat. In March of 1873, an election was held again. Pleasanton received 1,173 votes, and a place called Farmers City, 1,252. Farmers City was granted the title of the county seat. However, it was hardly populated, located approximately 1.5 miles south of Farlandville. Due to those facts, Lacine remained the county seat until April 1874 election. In that year, Pleasanton received 1,692 votes and Lacine 1,026. However, Pleasanton did not become the county seat, and yet another election was done in March 1875. In that election, Pleasanton received 1,201 votes, Mound City 1,311 votes, thus bringing the county seat back to Mound City, where it's remained ever since.
Well, the first thing that was ever down there was a blacksmith shop. Down at the foot of the hill on the north side of the street. And he sharpened plowshares and done repair work for the farmers. The train run through just a little bit to the left of us here, come run east and west. And the depot, it had a depot here at this location.
If one were to travel back to those times, say 1947, and start strolling down the street, they would see an abundance of businesses. Imagine standing on the north side of Main Street where the fire department currently sits on 6th and Main. You're standing on that corner, and you begin to walk eastward, reading the names of each business as you go. Kloffenstein's Garage, Ward's Produce, a pool hall, Kaiser Fraser Agency, Stanley's Shoe Shop, Hennessy Brothers Motor Power Gas and Company, the Aladdin Theater, Linn County Appliance, Ann Underhill's Women's Clothing Store, Shastine and Queen Grocery, Wilson's Men Clothing Store, Reese Variety Store, Turner's Lee IGA Grocery, Clark Hardware, Lander's Rexall Drug Store, Dewey Photos, Dr. Mead, Dentist, Turner's Main Street Cafe, the Post Office, Gorman's Mound City Truck and Tractor, Gar Johnson Produce, Huff Abstract Office, Nesbitt Beauty Shop, Nesbitt Barber Shop, Omer Brown Blacksmith Shop, Greer Phillips 66 Station, Irwin's Builders Hardware, Plumbing, Old Commercial House Hotel, Jaeger Motors, City Hall, Carbon Implement.
There was a grocery store on the south side of the street with Shickle's Grocery, and they had in the back of it, they had a freezer. And people used that because they didn't have freezers, didn't have electricity at home. We didn't have electricity at all. So they kept things in the ice boxes there in the locker in Mound City.
I remember when in the rural areas outside town, there wasn't any electricity. And of course, there wasn't any dial phones. And so I remember my dad reading by a kerosene lamp, and he had a battery-powered radio. So most of the farmhouses got electricity in the early 50s, early 40s, and it was a big deal. You know, people had parties, and when they got the light on, and then that, you know, for a lot of people who had a little bit more prosperous, they got indoor plumbing.
You realize that you've walked all the way east past the majestic courthouse. You cross the street to Bruce Truck Line and walk westward past the courthouse and jail. The next block you see is Mound City Lumber and Grain, Springmeyer Cleaners, C.J. Carey Insurance, McCabe Tavern, M&M Produce, Don Koppel Tire Shop, Glenn Burge Blacksmith Shop, Francis Wutke, Abstractor. In what is now the Crown Building, you would see Farmers and Merchants Bank, Leighton Fossey Attorney, Jack Morse Lawyer, Masonic Lodge. Past that, Bill Clark Furniture and Appliance, Koppel Motors, Dr. Mills Office, Extension and Farm Bureau, Mary Somerville Library, Shinkle's Mound City AG Store and Locker Plant, Bert Scott's Pool Hall, Michael's Home Cafe, Mound City Republic, Floretta's Beauty Shop, Ray DeMott's Cafe, REA Office, Telephone Office, John Data Market, Pop Post Jewelry, W.R. Austin Optometrist, Markham Cafe, Denny's Barbershop, Peatman Chevrolet, Mirando Feed Store, and Washington Nursing Home and the Old Brooks Hotel.
And my dad worked for Charlie Murray in the rock quarry as a bookkeeper.
And altogether, I have barbering in this little town for 61 years. And I've enjoyed it. I've met a lot of people. Still enjoy meeting the people. And it's easy to say that I have cut 5 generations of men's hair in 5 generations.
Then after the treasurer resigned, the one that was there, which was Cecil Boots, I believe, and Judy Donovan was going to be the new treasurer. She wanted me to come on full time. Anyway, I worked there, you can figure it, for 32 years. And then I retired in 2017. And I absolutely loved it. Loved doing the work, I loved the people, I loved the everyday camaraderie of the courthouse and all that. We had many, many good times.
We had a movie theater at that time, and so the women would take their kids and go to the movie, and their husband would come to the grocery store and sit around the big pot-bellied stove and smoke and spit and all that. And I went to work with her at 8 o'clock in the morning and got off the next morning at 1:30. The next Saturday, they let me go in at 8 o'clock with her. Then after everybody had their supper hour, they let me off because my mother said never again. I was so tired when I went home that
Where the Mound City Republic office is I believe where Tree has his pottery. And on election night, there was a huge big, to me it was only about this wide, but it was probably way wider than that. And it was way long and it was black like a chalkboard. And on election night, he would post the results. And you could go uptown and see that through his window.
Well, you know where the old Union State Bank building is? The next was a grocery store. Then there was a stairway, then John Michael's Cafe, and it was just the one width. And they had the cafe in front, and then he had a room in the back that he had a Nickelodeon. And that's where we went and danced. And the parents would let the young kids go there and dance because John was in there and supervised it all. He didn't allow any smoking, he didn't allow any drinking, and if they got a little rowdy, he shushed them out the door. So that and the movie was our entertainment.
And at that time, the businesses in town they served the farm economy, and there were a lot more farmers then. There's so few now compared to what there was then. And so there was need for implement dealers, and we had two or three tractor dealers, and I think maybe at one time 5 different car dealerships, and several 3 or 4 grocery stores, and all that was kind of a vibrant economy here.
Most of the farm people stayed on the south side of the street, along by the library and in that area, where they gathered and told their stories. And on the north side of the street was more or less the city people. There was a pool hall upstairs on the 2nd floor on the south side. Burke's Pool Hall.
And one time I was in the pool hall, which was a wonderful place. It was on the 2nd story where Red Logic is now. And it was great. There was an old man named Bert. He was a Scot, Bert Scott. And women didn't go there unless it was mothers looking for their boys. Or a sister looking for a brother or something like that. But that was a place women typically didn't go. And it was old and dark and just great. And it had a half dozen or more pool tables, and snooker tables. And the thing about that I always thought was great was the old men would teach boys how to play pool. And so there was a kind of a place where you related with older generations. The drawing was a big deal. People came in and just packed this Main Street. And there was a man named Al Irwin, and he had a dry goods store. And he would read the names.
That was really a large drawing crowd for Saturday afternoons.
Anyway, I was up there playing pool one day, and I heard somebody coming up the steps, and the door flew open. It was my mother, and she said, "Donnie, they're calling your name." Well, it was the drawing, and my name came up. And so she got me, and we ran across, and just in time, because they had they called your name like 3 times. And so I think I won $90.
Oh, it was. You couldn't get down Main Street, even though it was a highway. You didn't go down Main Street on Saturday afternoon.
Today, Main Street continues to evolve and change. There are many who would argue whether the changes have been for better or worse, but regardless, times and circumstances have changed. One-room country schools were phased out, and eventually even the Mound City School had to consolidate with two nearby communities of Blue Mound and Prescott, creating Jayhawker USD number 346. The original school was two-story and built of local limestone. There were two large classrooms, one on each floor. There was also a resuscitation room and a vestibule. In 1904, the citizens of Mound City deemed it unsafe, and a new square building made of red brick was started the following year. The building had 6 rooms, 3 on the first floor and 3 above. The old school bell found a home in the cupola. The new red schoolhouse had held all 12 grades and was situated just east from where the old school was torn down. Both the stone schoolhouse and the red brick schoolhouse have since been torn down.
Well, I went to country grade school. I went first grade at Kincaid, and it was southwest of Mound City.
The two-story brick schoolhouse soon became too crowded for all 12 grades, and a separate high school was built to accommodate grades 9 through 12. It was completed in 1922. A cafeteria was added on the west side of the high school in 1955, and 2 grade school rooms were added on the west side of the cafeteria in 1962. In 1965, an election was held in the county and was voted to have the districts of Blue Mound, Prescott, and Mound City consolidate into Jayhawker Unified School District number 346. Construction began on the Jayhawker High School in 1971, and is located 1 mile west of Mound City. Students from the 3 communities moved into the building in 1973. Elementary students in the communities continued to attend school in their respective towns. Prescott's elementary school closed in 2006 and Blue Mound in 2008. Just 2 blocks north of Main Street, if you turn at 5th and Main, you'll find the city cemetery, called Woodlawn Cemetery. It looks like most other cemeteries one will visit, but in the southwest corner you'll discover a section separate from the rest of the burials. This portion is called the Soldier's Lot and is part of the National Cemetery System, recognized and maintained by the government for fallen soldiers.
This Army officer comes to Fort Scott and stops there first. And the Grand Army of the Republic, the veterans, talk to him and show him where soldiers are buried outside of the National Cemetery. But then he comes north, and he's coming up to Mine Creek Battlefield. And he discovers, we'll never know the exact number, but he discovers 12 to 15 graves of Union soldiers buried on the battlefield. 2 of them are identifiable because they are marked, and one is a Lieutenant Curtis from the 3rd Iowa, which fought in the battle. He disinters the remains, and he brings them to Mound City, and he buries them in the soldiers' plot at Woodlawn Cemetery.
Within the Soldier's Lot lays abolitionist leader of the Jayhawkers, Colonel James Montgomery, along with nearly 50 other Grand Army of the Republic soldiers and veterans, 17 of which are unknown. As Mound City is the county seat of Linn County, Kansas, you'll find situated on the south side of Main Street between 3rd and 4th Street, a grand building built in Queen Anne style and completed in 1886. This courthouse is the second oldest courthouse in Kansas and that's still in use. It is a red brick with limestone trim, approximately 110 feet by 61 feet, and reaches 65 feet in height. The bricks were locally made at a plant just west of Mound City. Over 625,000 bricks were used in the building of the courthouse. The stone, too, was locally quarried from the Curry Quarry southwest of town. The flagstone was brought in from Pleasanton. The original roof was covered with red clay tile shingles.
That we are the county seat and have the courthouse, and that they have kept it in as good a shape as they have. I think that's wonderful.
Of course, they don't use the courtroom anymore. But in 1969, a movie was made there, The Learning Tree.
The Mary Somerville Library was established in 1876 by 12 young ladies from Mound City. They organized a literary society called the Mary Somerville Literary Society, named after a New England woman who had made achievements in education and had written books on science. It has enjoyed uninterrupted service since its founding. It's now located on the north side at 7th and Main.
I went to work for the Mary Somerville Library the first day of November in 1966. It had just joined the Southeast Kansas Library System, which is headquarters in Iola. And I was retired from there in '91 and went back and worked part-time until 2001.
The faith of many Mound City residents has been cultivated by one of several long-standing churches in the community. And in a time where many argue over different opinions and spiritual beliefs, it is refreshing to see the religious houses in Mound City working together, helping to tighten the bonds of an already tight-knit community. The charter for the First Baptist Church was written in 1866 and known as the Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. The first building was built on Chestnut Street in 1866. It was disbanded for a time in the early 1900s and reorganized in 1919. The past 100 years has seen a great growth in its membership and buildings.
And it's called Sacred Heart because a church can't be named after anyone who's not a saint. And so when the bishop, back in late 1930s, who bought the property here and had a vision to build a church as a shrine, or what's called a local shrine to St. Rose, Philip, and Duchesne, she wasn't a saint yet. She had to wait until 1988 before she was canonized as a saint. So anyway, the Mission Brothers donated the money to have this statue made, and also much of the marble for the sanctuary area of the church. And so they were very generous. They didn't live around here. They lived somewhere else, I think Western Kansas or somewhere, but they had a devotion to St. Rose, and they saw that doing these things was a way to contribute to the shrine.
The Mound City Federated Church, organized in December 1866, was originally named the Mound City Congregational Church. In the early 2010s, the old Federated building, constructed in 1867, was torn down, and the church reorganized again and built a new building on land next to where the old church stood and renamed themselves Mound City Christian Church.
I had a lot of very good friends and loved ones there. Bless her heart, my mother was a Sunday school teacher for several years. And anyway, and my dad was most generally on the board. So I'm sure he took his turn as a chairman.
Another long-standing church in Mound City's history has been the Mound City United Methodist Church. The first Methodist church was organized in 1856. Later, the Methodists held their services in different places in the vicinity until 1870, when the church was built on the southeast corner of 3rd and Main Streets. In 1903, land was donated to the church, and a new building was moved to the northeast corner of 3rd and Main, and is the current location of the church. In 1969, the Farlandville Methodist Church merged with the Mound City United Methodist Church, and the Wesley Chapel Methodist Church did the same in 1971. Two nearby places of worship that have strong ties to the Mound City community include Wall Street Christian Church and Shalom Ministries. Wall Street Christian Church is located 7 miles northwest of town on a road commonly known as Wall Street Road. Shalom Ministries, located several miles north of Mound City on County Road 1095, was founded by John and Grace Reeder, missionaries to the Ivory Coast and West Africa for 36 years. John and Grace moved back to Linn County to Grace's family farm, which they turned into Shalom Retreat Center. The center has grown in the nearly 30 years since the Reeders have founded it. Technology has advanced, jobs industries changed, the improvement of the highway system, the ability to shop online. All could be attributed to the changes Mound City has undergone over the years. Yet many still call the sleepy little town home. You'll see them gathered on Friday nights in the fall, cheering on the high school football team, watching their children and grandchildren playing t-ball on hot summer nights. They still wave at passing cars, hold the door for the next person, giving directions to a visitor, content to live their lives filled with peace and kindness that are elusive in many areas of the world.
Okay, the friendly people. When we first moved here, we were just astonished. And it's a small community. A lot of people are related, but there's no cliques. Everybody just welcomed you.
Very friendly, easy to get along with, good businesses, lots of small town atmosphere.
I think everybody knows everybody. Of course, they know a lot about everybody too. So, but it's just a fun place to live.
Everybody waves at each other, and of course, everybody kind of knows each other. I'm not very good with names. Everybody knows my name.
Family connections, the friendships, the closeness, the history of everything in Mound City.
Lived here 43 years.
Okay, and what do you like about Mound City?
The peace and quiet mainly, the hometown feel, and just kind of everybody's your friend or neighbor. You can usually trust about anybody here to do about anything.
I like the historic structures that are in town, especially the Horde House. It's so photogenic, and it's just a quaint town that has all the things in it that you really need to have.
And I think one of the things I like most about Mound City is the rich history that's here.
What makes it special, the people make you feel at home, and they're very friendly, and I don't know, I can't say enough for it.
Well, yeah, I think Mound City's a nice town.
One more, Mound City, I need to hear you.
One thing that sticks out to me most about Mound City is that if someone here is thirsty, we make sure they get a drink. If someone here is hungry, we make sure they are fed. If someone's homeless, we make sure that they get the appropriate shelter. And that says a great thing about this community, and that we put our heart into it.
All the people here are so friendly, and if you ever need help or have a crisis in your family, there's so many people that are willing to jump in and help, whether it be with financial help or even just a meal or listening ear.
I have worked as a teacher for over 20 years, and making a difference in the lives of children in this community is something that I'm very passionate about, and that I want children to leave Mound City as a citizen that will make a difference in communities everywhere.
Growing up in Mound City gave me the opportunity to see what it looks like to have adults be very generous with their resources for the youth of the community. We had no pools in Linn County at that time, and I guess was like everyone else. We only had Fort Scott to go to if we wanted to go swimming. So a group of adults in Mound City got together and formed a committee, and we started a fundraising to build a pool for Mound City. So families were generous with their resources, and we had fundraisers, and we accomplished the goal of having a pool in Mound City. And I spent many days there, many summers growing up, and so did my own children.
One great thing about our community is how well everybody bands together
in times of need, whether it be an individual or a group is needing something to happen for them to make things a better situation or to improve for our youth. Our community, I've never seen anything like it where everybody will band together in support of someone or something.
Over the last 50 years, there's just countless times that I can remember where people were in need and the community completely rallied around them and helped them through it. So I would just say that there's a special kind of love in our community that I would find it may be hard to be replicated anywhere else. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I love my hometown, and I am very proud to say that I'm a resident of Mound City, Kansas.
I love Mound City because of the beauty of Mound City, the people of Mound City, the kindness, the warmth, the compassion, and history, and I guess the dedication of the people to keep this town alive.
Yeah, I was coming back from Fort Scott that day when it was raining.
My dad told me, son, just take it slow. Hands at 10 and 2 eyes on the road. Stay off your phone, and when you meet a girl, and take her out, open up the door and help her down. Have her home by 10, that's all you need to know. I can hear him now saying I told you so. 'Cause baby, we're built to last. Like a hand-me-down Ford with 2-tone doors and a couple dogs in the back. Like a bottle of wine, getting better with time. We're right on track, like an old Tom Petty song in my head. A leather-bound King James by the bed. Yeah, you know when you know, and I know we're never gonna look back. Yeah, baby, we're built to last. Grind some gears and face some harder days. Might break down somewhere along the way, but we'll be okay. And if our hearts get broken out in the great wide open, we'll stand our ground no matter what it takes. 'Cause baby, we're built to last. Like a hand-me-down Ford with 2-tone doors and a couple dogs in the back. Like a bottle of wine, getting better with time. We're right on track, like an old Tom Petty song in my head. A leather-bound King James by the bed. Yeah, you know when you know, and I know we're never gonna look back. Yeah, baby, we're built to last. Like a hand-me-down Ford with 2-tone doors. Like a bottle of wine, getting better with time. Baby, we're built to last. Like a hand-me-down Ford with 2-tone doors and a couple dogs in the back. Like a bottle of wine, getting better with time.